I remember. All right.
We are recording.
Before
we end tonight, someone has to remind Jenny to take a photo of all of us with our cameras on before the night's out.
I keep forgetting. All right. So we're recording now. Let's do this thing. You starting?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All right. So I wanted to start off. How many of you guys had a chance to read any part of the book this week? Or listen to it this week? Anybody get a chance to? Okay. So I wanted to start obviously with the first chapter because I think is probably the most craziest thing. What did you guys think about the Israeli probation poll? Did you see that graph?
I listened to it.
If you did not see it, I'll share the screen with you real fast.
I listened to it, so no
okay. Graph. It's okay. No big deal. Give me a minute. Donnie, I'm going to request that next week you start us off with Louisiana Saturday Night as our song. All right, this is from chapter 7. And this is the real life statistics of what was actually happening in Israel as they were doing probation hearings. And so what happened is at the beginning of the day, they would start off at about a 60% approval rate. So if you were in prison and then you went for an appeal and you got awarded probation, about 60% of the time that you would be green lighted if it was the beginning of the day. But look what happened by the time they got to the morning break. The people who were listening to the break only had 2 breaks. The probationary committee only had 2 breaks, late afternoon, whatever. You can read it on the screen. Late morning snack and lunch. The point is that if you were going right before lunch or the mid-morning snack, what were your chances of getting approved?
Like nothing.
Almost zero. Almost zero. And the reason for it was just because the brain of the people who were listening to these appeals, there was a 6-minute section that they got to listen to a case. And it wasn't because someone's crime was different. It was solely because their willpower was depleting. Just like I love the example of your willpower is just like a battery in your phone. The more that you use it throughout the day, what happens to the battery, right? And eventually, if you don't recharge, you are going to lose the opportunity to achieve your goals. And I just think this is important to note because how many of us go about our most important goals later in the day because it's more convenient? Or how many of us go after them just sporadically, and when we can't conjure up the energy to do it, we get upset and when we beat ourselves up, right? I've been there. And the simple fact of the matter is you have to understand there's science that's actually real. And you have to play by the rules. We don't get to make the rules. It's just the rules of the game, guys. So if you're pursuing goals, I just think it's incredibly important that you're intentional, as we're going to talk about later in the book, time blocking, that you're intentional with when are you going after your most important activities. Some of you guys have a lead domino that's going to happen later in the day. That's okay. But as you're going after big goals, just remember, what am I doing to physically get myself in the best position to have maximum results? Because this book is all about getting maximum results and being extremely more productive. So I just wanted to hit that. Make sure you guys saw the graphic because I think it's incredibly powerful. If you haven't actually seen it, it's on page 94. I made that up. Whatever it is.
Not even in 94.
That's it. It's figure 8.
I wanted to just piggyback off of that for a second because I think this tied back in for me about the importance of a to-do list versus a success list. Because I love to do the things that are really easy first because I'm be like, check, 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 check. And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, but that was the one thing that needed to get done today and I didn't do it. So that reminded me that as I was listening to that chapter, that willpower on will call, like there's a book called Eat That Frog, and it's like doing the most uncomfortable thing first because that's the thing that you really need to do, but you're not doing. So that I just wanted to tie back into that success list versus to-do list. Like it was another that's why you have to have that list going, Jenny. So then the next chapter was about a balanced life and how that's actually a huge myth. And this was something that was really big for Mark and I at the goal setting retreat last year. We knew that there was an ebb and flow of life. We knew that there were going to be times when life was really heavy work related, and then there were going to be times where we took family time. But the problem that we ran into the previous year is that we didn't have that conversation together. We both knew that life was going to be that way, but just because you know it doesn't mean that it's easy to live through it. And so when we took the time last November to sit down and say, these are the goals we want for his business, these are the goals that I want for our business, for our family, we were able to agree to that counterbalance, that graphic where it's like work this way and then work this way, and life's a little bit here and there and here and there. This time this year, when Mark has to work a Saturday, I'm not super ticked off like I was last year, because we can sit down and say, hey, what's the goal that you're working for this week? Have you accomplished it? Okay, yes or no. And it adds up to the big year-end goal. So I know that a Saturday morning, he's going to make that time count, as opposed to last year when I didn't know what he was doing when he worked all weekend. Like, honestly, I know what he was working towards because we hadn't talked about that together. So I can't stress to you guys enough, if you are in a relationship, to go to this goal setting retreat with your significant other, because we now every Sunday night sit down and time block together. We sit down and say, okay, where are you with your goals? What do you need? Like, so for example, for me, I'm a health and fitness coach, and this week is a launch for a new program. So I know I need more time to sit and work with my coaches who are helping new people get started, sitting with my new customers who are getting started. So I knew that I had to block out more work time for me than I normally do. Same thing like what we talked about, like towards the end of the month, if he hasn't hit his goal, we know that there's probably a Saturday or Sunday that he's going to work. But this year, we're okay with it. And so Sunday nights we sit down, we look at our calendar together, and we time block that out. So it's not an anger issue anymore. We know that counterbalance is happening and we're agreeing on it together.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously most of us think that this is what life should look like. This equal time between work and home. And Gary, as you read, says in the book that the problem is nothing happens in the middle. Nothing exciting happens in the middle. Even in scripture, Jesus says, if you're lukewarm, what am I going to do? Spit you out of my mouth. I don't want the lukewarm. Be hot or be cold, but don't live in the middle. And we think that this life right here is what we really want, that I'll go to work and I'll come home and I'll be equally prepared to be at home. And it's not true. There's no magic that happens there. On the other side, you can't be this extreme, because business takes over everything and then life takes over everything. And there's there's magic, but it has its own problems as well. And then this is kind of what you really see is what really happens, and where life can really be magical, where you do have to devote extra time to that project at work. You do have to devote extra time to being off of the grid from work and being home with family. And what Jenny's saying is it's super critical to make sure that when you're setting your goals, especially if you're married or have a significant other, it's really important that you understand that when I declare a goal, that requires time of me, which means that she's going to get less time of me. So by me setting a goal by myself for my business, for my life, for my physical fitness, for my whatever, by not including her in the goal, I by default am asking her to sacrifice on what's important to her. Dramatic pause.
It's like,
it's true. If I set the goals all the time and I say, hey, this is what's important for our business this year, and I'm going to go after that. And then by default, she's going to stay up later doing kids. She's going to stay up later doing dinners. She's going to clean the house by herself because I'm making the job happen. But when we got on the same page as far as the goals, we're united behind the two of us. And guess what it does? It brings my awareness into the time I'm wasting time at work, where I'm multitasking or whatever it is. So that way I can get the work done in less time and get home to be with family. How do we do how do we do more with less? We get focused, right? So that's just that. And then the last thing, that chapter that we talked about is big is bad. Guys, it's really simple, is don't think that because you're setting higher goals that they're more difficult. It's actually harder to hit lower goals, because you'll actually trick yourself into thinking that you're moving the needle, and really you're just not. It's just as difficult to hit a high and lofty goal as it is to hit one that's kind of in the middle. And if you set goals that are really, really like too easy, then you're almost like joking yourself into success. Set the bar really, really big. Stretch your brain. Think big. Act small. Trust the dominoes will actually fall. That's what the book is all about. So how do we set this goal so high that it seems like I don't even know if that's possible, and then build the box, put the systems in place, so that way you can actually achieve it? It just requires you to actually get intentional, be focused and planned, and then be intentional with your time. So I want to hear from you guys. We've gone through the first section of the book at this point, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
So tell me, what was the 20% for you guys? What did you read that you went, man, this was like,
If you read nothing else, like this is the one thing that you are so thankful that you read the section 1.
or that you've learned on the call?
I had several, but this week was like the multitasking. Like, oh, I can just do everything. Like, I can get the kids' homework done. I can cook dinner. I can clean house. Like, I can do all these things, and they all get like half done, or like half effort of like screaming at the kids to go do their homework, and dinner burning, and baby screaming, and okay, it's done, but it's not done well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just like, okay, well, I need to like plan and be able to focus on like one thing at a time instead of trying to do it all at once.
I love it. Thank you. Anybody else?
I liked about the multitasking, but I also liked, just because I'm in school right now to get my NP and my husband's overseas. And so I am multitasking at its finest, not, but learning to like really prioritize the time and focus on one, assignment with school at a time instead of trying to do like a little bit of this one and then a little bit of this one. So like I got one assignment done last week, and then this week I'm working on another assignment, and just trying to focus on one assignment at a time instead of looking at the big stuff, the semester as a whole with 3 classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really smart. I wish that I had had this when I went through college, because I drove myself crazy. Like that would have just
Don't go back to school at my age. Like this is like not as easy as it was in my 20s.
Are you, in either case, are you guys seeing that even on the tasks you're doing, is your brain starting to go now, okay, I've identified the 20% tasks. What's the 20% of this task that's going to give me 80% of the results? Have you guys started to do that yet?
Yeah, like I've started to look at like how to like, it just like prioritizing the small tasks that add up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of looking like even at one assignment, like informatics and business is not my strong suit at all. In this class, I was like, I didn't sign up for business. I'm a nurse. But basically I'm like breaking this assignment down by like, I think it's 5 sections actually, and just taking the 20% at a time instead of even looking at it as a whole even.
Smart. Very smart.
That's the same thing like what Gary talks about with guitar, right, Donnie? I mean, if you just build the scales, everything else from there pretty much gets a little easier. So awesome. All right. So what's up, Tori?
Hi. Sure. I was kind of muted because we have this little puppy here, and she is very active, and now figured out that she loves plastic water bottles.
Oh,
once they're empty, and wants to crunch them, and I'm like, okay, she's keeping up a lot of noise, so that's why I was kind of muted for a while.
You're fine. So tell us, what was your 20% so far?
Mine's would be the time blocking. Being consistent on time blocking on Sundays, because I had started doing that. Me and my husband had started doing that, but then we fell away from it, and it was just like, okay, you do your thing, I do my thing, and then it hit home when you said that when you don't do that, then you're asking that other person subconsciously to to sacrifice some of that time. So it definitely hit home that the time blocking is very important on a Sunday in order to get my task, to get that 20% done.
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest, he asked me to do this for I don't know how long. He asked me to make the time to do that on Sundays, and I was like, no, I want Sundays to be like a free for all, like whatever we want to do, family day. And then I was ticked off the whole rest of the week because I'm like, when are you gonna be home? Blah blah blah. And he's like, hey, if we could just sit down on Sundays, I could kind of talk about that with you. So it's really been a game changer, and you can still have a free for all fun Sunday. We just know that there's like a half an hour of our day that we're gonna sit and have that conversation. So
Right.
it's I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and as you do it more, the time gets shorter. So.
Yeah.
All right. So here's some questions that I want to throw out to you guys and just kind of discuss. So, this is just kind of a journaling exercise. We're going into the fourth quarter, or we're in the fourth quarter of the year, right? So October, November, December, this is the last stretch of the year where, as we all know, it's going to get really chaotic, as if life hasn't been chaotic enough this year. It's going to get even more chaotic with the holidays and figuring out how all this stuff works. But I just want to ask you some very, very simple questions. The first one that I want to ask you is, think back all the way to the beginning of the year. What were some of the goals that you had set for this year that you said you would want to accomplish in 2020? Take a minute and just write down what you can remember. All right. Next question I want to ask you is, what are some of the wins that you've had this year that you haven't taken the time to really celebrate or enjoy? Like, you started off with these goals and then everything got flipped upside down. And then you still had wins this year. But you probably, if you're on this call, it's probably because you're looking to be more successful and you're a high achiever. And as high achievers, more times than not, we hit success and then we just blow past it trying to get to the next success. So what are the wins that you've had this year? Think back, take a minute, think back. What are the wins you've had this year that you probably haven't given enough time to celebrate or enjoy?
I didn't celebrate either one of those things. I did them. She's sticking her tongue out at you.
Mm-hmm. So daggone cute. All right, and my last question for you guys is, through this first section, if you could only apply one thing that you've learned to the fourth quarter, what would it be? We've talked about the domino effect, how success leaves clues, going small, everything matters equally, multitasking, a disciplined life, willpower, a balanced life, and big is bad. If you could only apply one, what would that be?
Why are you laughing at that?
Jenny gave me an interesting answer.
Okay.
At the end of the book, there's a section on thieves of productivity. And one of the questions that is in the thieves is, what's one thing that's going to cause you to not hit your goal? So I want you to go ahead and write that down. What's one thing that's going to prevent you from implementing whatever you just wrote for question 3? What's something that's going to prevent you from actually doing what you just said you were going to do?
Do it all.
Mark, I'm sorry. I didn't get to hear what you said because you actually froze up. So I didn't get to hear what you just said.
I said, on that third question, which was, what's one thing you're going to pull out of this section to apply to the fourth quarter? My next question is, what's one thing that's going to prevent you from implementing that? Identify the thing that's going to prevent you from implementing it. And then the rest of you guys, the next question is, what's one solution for that? So identify what you wanted to implement. You're identifying what's going to prevent you from doing that, or stopping you from doing that, and now you're going to problem solve. What's the solution for that problem?
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. I just came up with it right now. All right. Let's tackle this third question. What's the one thing that you're going to implement in the fourth quarter? I don't need you to share what's going to be a problem or what's a solution, unless you want to, but let's just really answer the question. This is where I'm going to break you guys up into 4 individual groups so you can talk to yourself. Just kidding. Let's just bounce around here. Who'd like to share first? Jenny, thanks for volunteering. Go ahead.
Which one am I answering?
The third question. What's one thing that you're going to implement?
I feel like I have to share this to say that.
That's fine. Go for it.
Okay. So my one thing that I'm taking from this first section is to work off of a success list. I am so guilty of a to-do list. So guilty. So when I don't work off of a success list, it's because I'm trying to think of step 5,000. Like, I want to know where all this is leading. Like, I want to be able to think about and prepare for step 5,000. And that works to our advantage, sort of, but most of the time it ends up causing a lot of stress and inaction because I don't know how to get ready for step 5,000 and no one's asking me to. So my solution to that is to just continue to go back to that question. What's the one thing I can do to move closer? And I have to remember that it's okay if it's a really easy thing to do, because sometimes I think like, well, that surely can't be, that's too easy. Like, I've got to have a harder thing to do. But that's what I'm going to work on, what I've taken from this first section.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Mine is doing things with intention instead of doing everything.
I like that.
Sometimes I just feel like I have to do it all.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing.
Mine's just focusing on one task at a time instead of trying to multitask, and to remember, like, my goal at the end is to be an NP, but like, I can't look at my 8-month goal right now to graduation. Like, I need to look at what I have to do right now to get there. Because it is overwhelming, especially by myself when my husband's overseas and trying to keep my 3 kids, wrangled in and keep the house going and keep the food in the pantries and stuff like that. So just remembering that, I don't have to do it all today or tomorrow, and that it's one step at a time and taking one day at a time even.
Allison, where are you located?
South Carolina.
Awesome. Thank you.
I used to think multitasking was a good thing, and I did it a lot, and I usually met my goals, but I was really burnt out after the strenuousness of multitasking. So applying the 80-20 rule, I think that's helped me so far with not multitasking and focusing on that lead domino, that smaller win that leads into bigger ones.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it, man. Thank you so much. Tori, you don't have to share, but if you want to, we'd love to hear from you, but don't feel like you need to.
Sure. I would say time blocking the one task that I need to do daily, which is making sure that I dedicate 1 hour to trading. And if I do that, then I get better with trading. I learn more. I see the charts differently, all of those things. So, so Monday through Friday, consistently dedicating that time block to nothing but that.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Very
Yeah, that's
cool.
awesome. That's awesome. All right. Jenny, I have one more question for you guys, I think.
Nope, I don't.
Oh, perfect.
Nope, you took them all. That's fine. So that is all we have for you guys tonight. We are moving into section 2, and we're actually going to read all of section 2 this week. It's just 3 chapters, chapters 10, 11, and 12.
It's just.
Marquez when I say the word just.
It's like, listen, I mean, obviously the focusing question we experience on a lead dominant call, right? What's the one thing I can do such by doing it? Everything else becomes easier and necessary. The success habit is the implementation, and then the path to great answers. It's just how are we going about asking ourselves great questions?
So it's a really big chapter section, I should
It
say.
will take longer to read because it's obviously we'll need it.
So yeah, make sure you time block when you're going to listen or when you're reading this week, because it's really, really good content. So we will see you guys back this time next week.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for being here.
Yes.
We really appreciate it very much. It was fun talking to you, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Donnie,
All
you're
right,
the
ready?
man.
Everyone smile on 3. You're not going to take away your phone.
Oh, no, I wasn't going to do that.
Everybody listen to notification. All right, you ready? 1. What are we doing? A one thing pose or what are we doing? Just smiling?
Sure, we'll do what they goes.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining tonight.
See you guys.
Hi.
Thanks. See ya.